let's go into the real reason why I decided to come out and make this pod so soon. That's because everybody has been eating me up on the internet over this Comics Explained bullshit. All right, first off, all you little Comics Explained cronies can back the fuck off, because I didn't really say anything about Comics Explained. All I did was report about Comics Explained. I never called Comics Explained a coon. I never called him weird. I never called him, some sort of Uncle Tom or anything like that. I just reported on the niggas who said that. Okay? It's a fact. And I don't mean, I'm sorry you got so triggered, but maybe you got so triggered because you know deep down a lot of that shit has some sort of merit, right? A hit dog is gonna holler, right? And I talked about it in the last video about how I don't necessarily like using that type of terminology against other black men. I don't like holding those sort of terms and viewpoints over them as some sort of, validation that they need to get from me to hold their own blackness, right? So I don't enjoy that. But if there are other black people that notice certain things and are willing to speak on it, then they're willing to speak on it, and that is on them. And not for nothing, they did have some points. And I don't say shit like that lightly, right? People in the comments kept on saying, like, Blue Marvel, Blue Marvel. And this is how I know people didn't watch the whole video. This is how I know people didn't watch the video. Number one, because my average view duration was only like 4 or 5 minutes. And the video is like 16 minutes, so I know they didn't watch the whole shit. But even if I didn't see that, I would know that because the comments, which have been flooding me right now, are talking about Blue Marvel, Blue Marvel, Blue Marvel. It's like, nigga, yeah, I know Blue Marvel. I told you that he's talked about Blue Marvel. You know what I also said about Blue Marvel is the fact that he did Blue Marvel, and then people in the comments ate him up off that video because they're fucking racist. Because these niggas don't like black people that much. Because the comic community is a very, very alt-right white space. And that doesn't mean that there aren't, that there isn't diversity in the entire community. Number one, if we're talking about alt-right fascism, let's be 100% real. That tent has gotten a lot wider in the last 10 years, right? You go from, how we were raised in elementary school and middle school when we think about certain fascists from a certain European country, right? And we would say that they only care about people with blonde hair and blue eyes, and only people with blonde hair and blue eyes are the people that worship that thought process. That is not the same today. Right? A person will, because of the internet, I think, realistically, and because of how when people are chronically on the internet, they can erase who they actually are and completely live in delusion while still having their anonymity online. So the delusion gets even deeper, So now you have people who are Nazis, who are Latino Nazis. You have black Nazis. You have tons and tons of white Nazis, right? And then also on top of that, you have people of color who just have simply low self-esteem, right? And I feel like that is where a lot of these types of situations come from. Now, when it comes to the comic book society and the comic book community, it's the same exact thing. I'm not saying that everybody who watches Comics Explained is a fucking Nazi. That's not true. That's fucking insane. That's a crazy thing to say. It's not real. I watch Comics Explained. I don't see myself as that. There are tons of amazing white people who watch Comics Explained who are not like that. All right? You like how I qualified that to hold everybody's hand and make them feel good about themselves and not racist, okay? But let's be real. Like I said, the comic book community has always dealt with that shit. And now, because the internet, like the 4chan fascism community has grown, the black nerd community has grown, the Latino nerd community has grown, the Asian, the Asian Western comic book community has grown. Like Asian people who, sure they fuck with animated, but they fuck with DC and Marvel a lot more. That has grown too. It's all grown, right? And we all interact with each other a lot more than we used to, right? A lot of people of color used to feel alone when it came to comic books and stuff. I still remember growing up in suburban New Jersey and going to this place, the little shop of comics and cards in Scotch Plains, New Jersey, right? And that's where I walked to every single day after school, in middle school, spend my little $5 that I would save. My mom gave me money for lunch. I'd get a little bit, something for lunch and then save up whatever to buy comics at the end of the day, right? And I walked in there every day, and I will tell you that woman who owned that store looked me up and down every day and followed me around every fucking day. And that's not to say that the entire community was racist, right? But I will say that this is something that the comic book community in general has had to deal with. And it's not because the comic books are inherently racist. It's not like that. It's just that we live in America, and America has problems with racism, and that extends into every single thing that America does and what American people do. That's it. So I don't know what to tell you guys, man. You know, Comic Explain seems like a cool dude, but he also seems a little bit delusional. He recently was on this dude CerosTV doing this whole explanation campaign, I guess, that he's doing. And you know what I will give to Comic Explain, right? Because everybody wants to call him a coon, they want to call him this, they want to call him that, right? They want to shit on him and everything because he's not doing enough black stuff. But I will give to Comics Explained, he's getting his back kicked in with so many people. You know what I will give to Comics Explained is he's getting his back kicked in by so many people of color that now I'm learning new black YouTubers who focus on comics. So I can't be that mad at him, because if it wasn't for him being called a coon, I wouldn't have found half these niggas on here that I now subscribe to and watch. So shout out to him. But let's watch him kind of squirm a little bit and I think come to terms with the way that he's being seen. And I think there does need to be a little bit of analysis on this and the way that he's conducting himself.
Spare people dealing with all that bullshit for 30 minutes. Yeah, I'll happily do that.
I
But I'll
believe
do that
it's
with a smile on my face.
I think it's the ambiguity that leaves people turning against you. So I would say the tribal mentality of it all is a little bit disparaging, right? I'm
I mean,
sure
I
you
don't.
hate it, right? You hate it, yes.
I mean, I don't know if I would chalk it all up to tribal mentality. I mean, there's certainly some individuals out there who are just like, "Oh, come, let's explain that's controversy, right? Let's get the clicks," you know. But I think there's some people out there that are legitimately like, I mean, I'm a huge fan. Like, how much of this is true, right? Like, where does this guy stand in it all? So
And you know what? I got to give it to Comics Explained. He is somebody who I do think has a good amount of self awareness and is decently honest about himself. I don't think there's necessarily like personal flaws in him as a human being. You know what I mean? Like there's shit just missing. I think there's just maybe he just wasn't raised a certain way, and so he's just not paying attention to certain stuff. He has certain denials about things, but I think he's self-aware enough, and he's a good enough guy that he's starting to see the point that people are making. And I do like how he's not kicking and screaming as much as a lot of people would in this situation. Also, I feel like the dude over here kind of reminds me of the guy from Afro Samurai. You know, remember that, like, what is that little like ghost character or whatever? Who's like, damn, Afro. He kind of reminds me of him. Anyway,
yeah, if you run a YouTube channel, and you don't really make your personal politics known, nobody really knows where you stand, and then somebody fires up a video and they start accusing you of racism, then I mean, where's the evidence to say it's not true?
True,
There
true,
really isn't
true.
anything for.
and that is completely true, and that's a very, very real thing. But I feel like I wish he would have thought of that before all this happened, right? I think there's there's not really, I won't say there's a full on duty to be like, I believe in this ideology and I am this presenter. No, but I do think when you feel like your community is leaning toward a certain demographic or thought process, if you are not part of that thought process, you do have a bit of a duty to tell them that and to disclose that and maybe show a little bit more of yourself, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't stand on your principles, then all you are is about money. And, money just, it's not everything. It's not everything. And I'm not the only one that believes that. The more money guides you, the less people have respect for what you think.
for anybody to play. There's no video for anybody to pull up, on the Comments Explained channel where they say, "Well, here's where Rob lines out his political views." So like clearly that's not true. That doesn't exist. So yeah.
Do you enjoy the ambiguity?
Yes. Yes, he does.
To a degree. I mean, the reality here is like we're living in extreme times.
And that's the core of it, man. That's the core of it. I think, there's a lot of people who've talked about him in general and what they think he believes. And I'm kind of in the same boat. I think he is a bit more liberal. He'll talk about it in this video about how he doesn't support ICE and certain things like that, but I definitely think he is a bit more on the right side, whether or not it was a family upbringing that had brought him here, or just personal things in his life that brought him there. That's on him. He has the right to believe those things, but he definitely believes those things on a certain level. You're right. And listen, I guess he has the right to. It's just one of those things. It sucks, but I guess it just is who he is. I don't know. It's weird because he is somebody who has said like, hey, I don't like ICE. I don't like this. But I also feel like if this conversation goes deeper and deeper and deeper, I think there's going to be some coon adjacent views. There, I said it. There is going to be some shuck and jive thoughts that are there. And what they may mean, I don't really know for him, but it's just kind of ridiculous, bro. It's like, bro, just pay attention to the way the world is. And I was one of those people that, about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I used to say, oh, people are nuanced and, right, both sides, and there's so many different things, and da 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 da. And I was always Black Lives Matter and very, very like leftist, but still being more open to the concept of both sides. But now I feel like both sides has gotten so vile and disgusting that you can't really go both sides. It's like it's the right that is saying, hey, we would like to annihilate people who don't look a certain way and don't believe in the Christian doctrine. And then there's this side that's just like, hey, whoever you are is okay, and we should be giving more to the populace, which is what the government is here for. I can't really find much of a nuance between those two things. And to me, that's what really kind of gets under my skin about all this stuff. And I'm going to speed it up here. I think he was talking about some other stuff too. He already says that he doesn't like Trump and he doesn't like ICE. So I at least like that. But even being a Republican at this point is just like you've lost the plot.
Yeah.
Right. Like something that you pointed out, in your video yesterday, and that's the reason why I talked to you, because you seem like one of the few people who wouldn't immediately just be like open up, like, so Rob, why are you racist? Who would immediately reject me? And I completely get, right? I mean, there are some people who are just kind of who have already made up their mind, right? And I'm not going to try to convince people who've already made up their mind. Hopefully they change their mind, yeah, but I'm not going to go out of the way to convince them. But I mean, let's literally address the thing directly, right? Like, Ernie described Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic as white supremacists. I don't know that I would define them as white supremacists because I'm not aware of them advocating for like Black people losing their rights, for like us being, being sent back to the 60s, like Black people, you can use these bathrooms, and white people, you.
See, now this is my thing too, and this is where I was talking about where maybe it might be a little bit of upbringing. Number one, I haven't watched Nerdrotic or Critical Drinker. I haven't watched any of their videos. I know in the last video I said maybe I'll check them out. I don't want to check them out because at this point I've watched so many different videos of all these different Black creators, and they have essentially told me that, yeah, these guys, they make a lot of racist comments. And even here within this, Rob will eventually start talking about why they have the point of views that they do. So it'll be some sort of critique of like, oh, I don't like this character, but the reason that they don't like that character is because they were changed to a Black person, not because they don't like the dynamics or the story development of that character. And I've always been somebody who is against stuff like that. Like I'm not the biggest fan of race swapping every time in a movie. It can get annoying. In fact, I think that is sort of the function of it, to annoy people so that people talk about it on the internet, so that hopefully people will at least hate watch it, because there's so many different things that occupy people's minds, that they don't think they can necessarily get you to watch things out of pleasure anymore. They would rather place their bet on you getting angry and agitated, tuning into it, and being pleasantly surprised by the product that they make, than you getting everything you think you want, but because you have everything else that's curated to you, you put that thing to the back burner and you watch it 3 months from now rather than watching it in the weekend that it's released. So I think that's what a lot of stuff comes from. Well, back onto the white supremacist thing, I think our people need to change their idea what they think a white supremacist is. I think if you are someone who conducts in white supremacy in any real palatable way, you are in fact a white supremacist. I think you could even make the case that a person who's just like a regular old, kind of racist, you know what I mean? Like an old grandma who isn't controlling people's policies and maybe doesn't think we should go back to segregation, but feels uncomfortable when a black person walks by and she covers her purse. I think you can make the argument that that woman is a white supremacist as well, right? A white supremacist isn't necessarily a quote unquote Nazi, right? A white supremacist is just someone who upholds the values of white supremacy. And brother, that is a long, long list. But there's a lot of people that I think, because of the way that they're grown up, they purposely deny microaggressions, and they purposely deny the signs of white supremacy, because they don't want to make things awkward. They don't want to be the odd man out. They don't want to deal with any of that type of bullshit. And a lot of times, maybe they were the more palatable black person, right? So they get treated kind of well, and they're afraid that, if I say something, then I'm not going to get treated well, and I'm going to be the one who's difficult, and all my friends, because they are these people's friends, right? This is their support system, are going to abandon me, so I'm not going to say anything. And it leads to this. It leads to, hey, my friends, or hey, this person I watch, or hey, this person who posts on Twitter who I follow, yes, they make some racist comments, they say things that are based on race, but they're not saying that every black person needs to get sprayed with fire hoses and lynched, so therefore they are not a white supremacist, which just simply isn't true.
Can use these bathrooms. Now, are there certainly like racist connotations to their videos? Yeah. And like, do some of them contain racist sentiment? Sure. You can't stand up and say, I don't like that Sam Wilson is Captain America, and then say nothing when Barry Allen replaces Wally West, right? Or Wally West replaces Barry, post-crisis. If your position is, I don't like it when classic characters get replaced with new ones, then you don't get to pick and choose based on race. And even if they're not actually racist, it comes across that way. Having said that, I'm not really sure where people are getting the idea that like I watch their videos and subscribe to their channels and all that kind of stuff. I just follow them on Twitter. Right? I've never seen a video from Critical Drinker or Nerdrotic, and I'm certainly not subscribed to their channels. One of the things that you pointed out, and it was a really interesting point, one of the things you pointed out is you said, well, simply following them on social media is an endorsement. And I don't know if I agree with that statement, because to me, following them on social media is no different than me watching CNN and Fox News, right? Like, to me, endorsing those guys would be if I gave them a platform, if I retweeted the things they said, and if I liked the things they said, if I pushed my audience to them and said, guys, you 100% need to check these content creators out. Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic have their finger on the pulse of it all. If I were saying things like that, sure. But I've never talked to them. I've never interacted with them in a meaningful way, right? Like it's,
And I get what he's saying. He's like, yo, listen, like, these are just guys I follow on Twitter. And listen, in the last video, I did kind of come to his defense in that sense, right? A follow isn't necessarily an endorsement. But I also feel like when you don't make your ideals known, a follow can definitely be an endorsement. And in fact, the fact that he's following them and not quote unquote hate watching them, like I was saying that I do with certain people, that is a problem because he'll kind of go on to say that he watches these people, and in other videos he said it as well too. He watches these people because he wants an alternative point of view. But if that alternative point of view is racism, and you're actually entertaining that as an actual point of view, then it's essentially useless, and you are a problem, and you are an accomplice to what these people are. Now, if you're just hate watching it, and either you're watching these people to make content about how stupid they are later, to inform other people not to involve themselves in these people's content, that is one thing. If you're hate watching it to just get high and laugh at somebody who's so vastly lost in the world, another acceptable thing. I think personally, that is me, and I don't think I'm the only one who does this, because you see tons and tons of live streamer people who all they do is talk about how this guy or that guy fucked up again, and that guy that they're talking about is the opposite of what they believe in. They would never know that if they never watched them, right? So I don't think I'm the first one who is on YouTube who watches people that I find despicable. But the problem is he doesn't think these guys are despicable. That's the issue. And he still seems to be in denial of everybody else and why they think they're despicable. And it's like, yeah, I just watch them to have fun because maybe they have some good ideas. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think Robert E. Lee had any good ideas, and I don't think these guys had any good ideas, and I don't think Mr. H had any good ideas either, okay? Because that's what happens when you say shit like that, right? When you go, hey, I'm just listening to get in a nice little change of pace. It's like, well, why do you want to be at that pace? The fuck is wrong with this guy? But that's just me.
I simply just follow them on Twitter. And somehow or another, that's just kind of been turned into, well, Rob is perfectly content, with like racially motivated opinions. And I think to a degree, this is where the kind of tribal mentality comes into play, right? Like, you can agree with a person's point without agreeing for the reason behind it, right? So, for example, like Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic came along, and they're avidly against Sam Wilson being Captain America, right? And they'll come along and they'll say, Captain America: Brave New World sucked, right? That movie was just very poorly received and it was very done because Sam Wilson is Captain America. Okay, I can agree with the fact that the movie was poorly done. I can agree with the fact that it didn't perform well at the box office. And then I can reject the reasoning, which is that it's because Sam Wilson is Captain America. No, that's not really the reasoning at all. It was just a really shitty movie with a really shitty plot. Right, that's why the movie performed poorly.
So you don't want.
Well, I would say this. My rebuttal to that would be in the sense of, yes, you could agree with the sentiment without agreeing with the reasoning, but the reasoning informs how valid that sentiment is. And if the reasoning is dog shit, then you have to remove yourself from those people, right? That's really what my thing is. Unless your viewpoint is these are terrible people and I'm here to pick them apart for how terrible they're being, right? But if it's not that, then you have to push them away, right? Because like he's saying with the whole Sam Wilson thing, right? Like you're tolerating these people, even if you don't agree with Sam Wilson, he's black and that's why you shouldn't. You're still tolerating that kind of thought process, and even tolerating it is kind of a death sentence when it comes to these kind of ideologies and how people view you, right? And that's a really, really interesting thing. Like, for instance, somebody can make a sentiment that dating is too expensive, right? That's a sentiment that a lot of people would probably agree with. But if somebody said, yeah, dating is too expensive because when I take out my stepdaughter who's a teenager, you'd be like, whoa, 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 right? Get this guy. Someone get this guy. Turn on Not Like Us and get this guy, right? That's what would happen. You wouldn't be like, well, I can still keep this guy as like a friend because it's like, no, how did you get to that reasoning? What is that reasoning? And because you have that reasoning, I can't fuck with you. But that's just my thoughts when it comes to all this
Watch
stuff.
their content. Do they give this take on Twitter?
Yeah,
And this is another thing too, where this dude CerosTV, he goes in on them. When it comes to, hey, people pay attention to what you do, so you are kind of a role model for people. So when you follow these people, you're kind of normalizing it. I agree with that as well too on a certain level. But my real thing is just the bigger issue is just the fact that if you are going to watch them, you have to hate watch them. You have to make fun of them. You have to pick them apart. There has to be some function rather than I just want to see what they have to say. Because when you're living in the world of I just want to see what they have to say, that means on some level you think what they have to say is valid, and it's not. It's just not. Anyway, let's get off the Comics Explained stuff. If anybody has any more reasons to hate me, leave them in the comments. Let's talk about Akash Singh, man. This is something that I did not expect to come back, but apparently